we try to look at the visual culture from a purely aesthetic perspective to understand what is the stylistic identity and how the stylistic identity gets established over the long period of time, in spite of facing lots of changes in terms of its socio-political conditions, the other factors which are connected to economy, uh, the change in the religious dominance, and there are stories that is going to be open to you in the coming lectures, and there are certain things that I would like to repeat to emphasize on the aspects where our way of viewing the tradition and the traditional art forms, which are connected to the folk art and minor art, will get justice in terms of its critical viewing. So it's very important to understand the secular aspect of the practice as well as the religious plurality that they enjoy, uh, and we enjoy as viewers, and that is a wonder factor because there is some kind of a contradictory connection that must not be ignored. Uh, if I just give you some clue to understand that, you'll understand that when we say it's a community practice, even now, to be very frank, that in our country at least, we do not see that people from different communities live together under the same roof, um, unless it's a urban space which is having a metropolitan culture. So in the rural India, when we are talking about the rural art, we see that it's almost like a challenge where the communities they are staying together in harmony through their art and culture. So there are certain factor which removes the conflict that they have and makes them get tuned and stay in harmony. So it may sound highly utopian, but that is a possibility that folk and minor art provides us with. So when a performance of this sort takes place, which is a combination of some visual aesthetical images along with some interesting and free flowing lyric, beautiful tunes, music, dance, rhythm, and all the combinations, they create harmony. It doesn't really matter whether there are multiple religion and culture that are coming together there. It's for sure that they will come with conflicts and get harmonized at the end of it, and that is a basic idea perhaps. And I would like to also mention quite a few traditions which are from our neighboring countries, and they're excellent example to realize this particular spirit that is working as a positive factor for the habitual art practices for years. What we see in this visual culture that in many of the places when somebody is working on a religious text, it's only religion that is connected in the storytelling, and the characters are becoming more human, so they're getting humanized. As in our previous lecture, I was mentioning about the character Chand Sadagar in the Patachitra that I showed. It's a Manasa pot. What we could make out that Manasa is one secondary goddess. She is a goddess which who was not getting enough respect throughout, and she is just trying to get some kind of an importance for a particular community in a particular time, which is part of the medieval era, and her stories are part of the medieval literature. And in that time, whether she exists or not, but her followers are trying to introduce this character to the larger community by injecting fear, fantasies that is connected to a visual which is also very rich. The stories are often coming with a great visual possibilities, so that the painters, they feel inspired to paint images on the basis of that story, no matter which religion they believe in. But if the story is appealing enough, that becomes universal. So, although I mentioned many stories about the expulsion of the artists from the communities, which are quite widespread without much of an authenticity, if I make you remember that I told you about a very funny story, a very interesting one. I should not call it funny, but it has some kind of a interesting part in it, that the painter who was painting Shiva without Shiva's permission, then Shiva comes into the picture, and in the fear that Shiva would get offended and something very disastrous will take place, the painters got scared, and what he does is he hides the paintbrush inside his mouth. So instead of being offended with his act of painting the image of Shiva, the Lord Shiva himself, he got much more angry for the fact that the artist had disrespected his material, that is his paintbrush. So why should he put it inside his mouth? Because that's a sign of disrespect that he was showing to the paintbrush. So he gets angry and he expelled the artist and his entire community. So this is indicative. Of course, it cannot be a fact, because nobody has seen Lord Shiva to be part of the human community. But that's a character which is imaginary, and there are the religious stories that are connected to it. And there the artist encounters the deity himself, and the story finally provides us with a lot of visual possibilities. So when we see that there's a possibility, a strength of visual making in a story, the stories are getting very randomly picked up, and the stories are always welcomed from any tradition anywhere. So this is one aspect of expulsion that we get to see. There are also other stories where these artists were commissioned by some royal patrons, and they felt that these people cannot be controlled under any royal means. So they said that these people are too moody to be accommodative in the royal court for the public commissions. So these people are again thrown out, and they got back to their own community in their own comfort zones, and they lived like a pauper happily. So these are the stories that go on. But what we are trying to understand from it, that whenever there's a visual possibility, and whenever there's a new character that is taking place, it's getting highly popularized in the community, because through the character, the viewers or the audiences, they are trying to understand life and the ethos of life at large. So when there is the character called Chand Saudagar, he is a character who is making a protest that nobody can insert fear in him, and he was not willing to compromise. So it's the story of his struggle, his fight, and that keeps the people close to the character. The viewers, they identify themselves with the character of Chand Saudagar, who is very famous. There are writers who are also mentioning and writing stories on that character, Charles Saudagar, where they're talking about humanity, they're talking about humanism, which is a very, very modern aspect that has come from the medieval and dark age. And then modernity is all about humanity, where even the deities, the gods and goddesses, they are created by human being. Unless the human beings are recognizing them, they're insecure. So by the story of Manasa, it shows that she also needs the support of human beings. She needs the support of the community. Otherwise, the existence of that goddess would be nowhere. So these are the aspects that kept people engaged with those stories, and then from a religious purpose, it moved to a greater aspect that was more secular. So let's go back and see some images that was part of the wall in the public places, how folk and minor art had another aspect that was connected to the popular images. So folk art gave birth to popular art later in the modern period, although these two types of arts are not principally similar. They have some differences, but we will try to see that with some images and again come back to the topic with some more realization. The image is partially showing some wall paintings for public display. Another image from a miniature painting. It was in the beginning of 20th century that a handful of scholars started recognizing the aesthetic perspective of the regional artistry and threw light on them through their writings and speeches. In 1916, Anand Kumarswamy commented on the Pahari painting, which was less sophisticated and not too known at that point of time, from Rajasthan. That was quite worthwhile of appreciation and collection. It was Anand Kumarswamy who tried to revive all forms of Indian art, regardless of academic or non-academic style, to the European audiences. His writings enabled the viewers to grasp the aesthetics of rural and vernacular term of artistic expression. 1900 was a time when the contemporary art scenario of Europe was experiencing a dynamic idea of modernism. So, the educated and visionary art lovers and art collectors of Bengal could identify the unique virtue of Indian folk painting in non-academic category. They threw light on the archaic yet bold expression, fresh spontaneity, confidence, simplicity of means, and the very distinctive style that is of folk art. Seen in the picture is a old piece that is kept in the museum of the traditional practice of storytelling through a shrine. The tradition is still living, and we call it the covered painting, which has its location near Udaipur, Rajasthan. But this is from a traditional one which has this typical Western Indian influence. And see how the story unfolds in a shrine. There are different facets that opens slowly, and then we also see in the picture that there's a central deity who is there in the center of the shrine. So where the entire shrine is opened and the story is told, we reach the main god and goddesses at the end of it. There are other images where folk art is finding its new place. This is from the book building from Tara Books, the publication, and this is done by a traditional Gond painter. We also see its use in book illustrations, which are painted and then printed in serigraphy, the pillars that are painted with it, also a tomb in Jawahar Kala Kendra painted by Shrilal Joshi and the family. There are walls from Raghurajpur, Shekhawati, Navalgarh, a Madhubani painting on paper in an exhibition place, and see the difference that is there in a popular art which is made with a commercial means. Of course, the purpose is not very different, but it follows a very different aesthetic perspective. Madhubani painting painted on saris, the roadside idols, and some old toys broken which are found. It follows the similar kind of aesthetics. Art critic Ajit Ghosh and Mukul De, they were amongst the pioneers who began to collect and preserve the living folk art in 1920s to 1930s. Guru Sadar is another name that we discussed earlier. Through them, we get to understand how the tradition was significant for them and is still significant in today's time. With that, we are also going to discuss another tradition which is a purely Indonesian tradition which is connected to the Java and other regions like which are connected places, and the tradition is known as Wewang Kulit. Wewang means shadow, Kulit are the puppets. So this is the shadow puppetry, very commonly known as Wewang Kulit. The performances you can find in internet and many other sources. They're still very popular. That is during this performance, the like what is known as the Wewang Kulit, the performance, the master storyteller, who is known as the Tok Dalang, he introduces the shadow puppets and he projects it from the backdrop. So what we see are the salutes of the characters, and then they tell the story, and the puppets they dance and they tell the story with proper songs and narratives. So let's see the image. This is one image that I mentioned, where the master storyteller, who is known in the common like local language as the Tok Dalang, who conducts the shadow from behind the screen by reciting the tale with appropriate sounds and movements. The story goes that in Indonesia, when there had been a dominance of the Hindu rulers, they popularized this puppet shows. There had been actors who played the roles of the characters from Ramayana and Mahabharata, and they acted out on stage. These performances were the main mode of recreation that the local people had at that time, and they were highly popular at that time also. But then when it was taken over by the Islamic rulers, they didn't appreciate the use of characters and human images in those stories, those performances. So what they did was very different. What they did that they banned it for a while, and then people started missing it. So to have some mercy on them, they only allowed the salutes of the figures to be shown in those images, which are not highly representational. They do not have the naturalism into it. They're much more patternized, and hence it was allowed by the Islamic patronage and the rulers, and they didn't. They removed the ban from it. So what we see right now are those shadows. They're very rich, and most of those performers who write the script, who write the lyrics, the stories, and also perform there. Uh, Also, seeing the songs, make the puppets. They are mostly from the Islamic communities. So they are the believer of different religious faith, and they make stories which are they make characters and tell stories with those characters, and they also tell the moral ethos of Hindu religious epics and stories. So that is like a combination. There shows religious plurality in its pure form. And upon asking, when we read the interviews of those performers, most of the time they have one point to make, that they connect to the characters when they work with the character of Arjuna and the Karna, or Ram or Sita or Ravan, or any other important characters, or Hanuman. What they feel is they try to understand their personality, and they get inspired by their ideologies, their principles, and that keeps them going in their creations. So that is the importance of making it multi religious, and also by having this kind of plurality, it no longer remains a religious practice, and it gets a wider spectrum.